Hi, everybody. Welcome back to BallotCon. My name is Alex Michelson. I'm a political reporter at ABC7 Eyewitness News here in Southern California. And we've come to, I think, one of the most anticipated debates of the day. We're talking now about legalization of marijuana in California, Proposition 64. It's something that is bringing a lot of strong opinions on both sides, or a lot of different sides. And we've got people for and against. If you could just introduce yourself and your name, and then I'll have you guys do your opening statements.
Hi, I'm Michael Bustamante. I'm a spokesperson for Proposition 64.
Hello, I'm Luis Alvarado. I'm the spokesperson for the campaign against Proposition 64.
All right, Michael, let's begin with you. You have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Proposition 64 is probably the most comprehensive ballot measure that have been put before California voters. It seeks to regulate, control, and tax the adult use of marijuana. It is widely supported. Every single newspaper in Los Angeles, the LA Times, the Daily News, Orange County Register, the San Diego Union Tribune, even La Opinión and Hoy support Proposition 64. According to the Legislative Analyst's Office in Sacramento, it will raise about $1 billion, $1 billion, 20% for law enforcement, 60% for the communities, 20% for environmental impacts. Yes on 64 is comprehensive. Yes on 64 makes sense. And yes on 64 will be good for California.
All right. 1 minute.
You know, when you introduced the law right now, you said it's legalizing marijuana. The reality is marijuana is already legal for medical marijuana. We're talking about specifically recreational marijuana. And when you see 60 pages that was written for this law, there is no question that one thing comes to my mind first and foremost. We need to ask ourselves, when we write laws, are they supposed to help the people, or are they supposed to hurt the people? And when you're saying that the best thing that the proponents of this law is that it's going to bring $1 billion for Sacramento, then you have to look at the other side of the coin. And the reality is that we are fortunate to have a micro picture of what this law is going to look like, because it's already in place in the states like Colorado. So when you talk to the district attorney of Colorado, you talk to the doctors, the pediatricians in Colorado, what this law in its full implementation is doing to the communities in Denver, Colorado, they'll be the first to tell you there is pain, suffering, and even death behind the law as it's implemented in Colorado. So us in Proposition 64, we're going to tell you that it's bad for the community, and we want to make sure that people understand why.
Okay.
You know, Luis, I'm glad you brought up some of that stuff, because the most important thing that Proposition 64 will do is it'll end the failed war on drugs. The Latino community, the African community have been disproportionately impacted. They've been disproportionately incarcerated. They've been disproportionately interrupted. The community and the neighborhoods have been impacted by drug dealers and the drug cartels that Proposition 64 will get rid of. Now, when you talk about Colorado, there was an awful lot of opposition to Colorado, including Governor Hickenlooper. As it turns out that Governor Hickenlooper, who was an opponent, in fact, now, because of his experience, has come out in support of what is going on in Colorado. And the reason why it's 62 pages is because we learned from Colorado, we learned from Washington, and we made sure that the things that weren't included in their initiatives are the things that are included in Proposition 64.
To his point about the war on drugs and how much money is spent on that, do you think that's a good use of our money, our use of our time, and do you think that there could be some benefits on that?
Well, there's 2 points specific to your point. First and foremost, on October 12th, the district attorney of Denver, Colorado wrote a letter, and he was very specific when he said that 900% increase in investigations, in criminal investigations to marijuana and underworld marijuana production and distribution. So that's a complete fallacy when it comes to, is it going to fix the problems of criminality? It's not going to fix the problems. And I'm glad you also bring the governor of Colorado, because we just found out that the very prominent investigative report news program called 60 Minutes, it's going to be showing this Sunday. And in that program, we understand that the governor of Colorado is actually specifically giving warning to all the governors in those states that are considering this law to actually look at the damage and the collateral problems that they are facing or they could face. We're also going to see in that program the chief pediatrician talking about how babies are not being born with exceeding amounts of marijuana in their system. And this is a new problem that they have no understanding of how they're going to address at this point. And if you look at Colorado, the population of Colorado versus the population of California, and how many communities are going to be affected in California, this is a poison that is being brought by profiteers whose sole purpose in telling you that this is a good law for the people of California is that it's going to bring $1 billion to Sacramento.
Let's talk about the profiteers point, because I know some of the advocates out here who are against it, who are not speaking today, would like to speak, that one of their main points is that this is going to help companies like Monsanto, this is going to help big tobacco, that it's just going to become another business and we're creating a new big tobacco, which is going to be big marijuana. What's your response to that?
Well, it's consistent with their campaign as a whole. Disinformation, abusing the facts, that couldn't be any further from the truth. The fact of the matter is that, Proposition 215 was enacted here in California. There was an industry that was developed to create medical marijuana. That industry is not going to be impacted. In fact, the growers who have been doing it right, who have been playing by the rules, those are the growers who are going to have a 5-year period of time in which to continue to grow and be the ones who would actually grow the marijuana that would be part of the Yes on 64 when it passes. So no, this is not a big tobacco type of thing. In fact, it couldn't be any further from the truth.
Do you have a thought on that particular point?
Well, in 1999, I used to work for a company called Southern Wine and Spirits. I was a corporate director of security and safety for Southern California, a billion-dollar company that basically was the largest liquor distributor in the world. And at the time, my boss, Ted Simpkins, who is now one of the proponents and one of the guys who's organizing this proposition, obviously he's investing a lot of money because he is looking for a profit. He's not looking to benefit the communities of South Central Los Angeles. He is not looking to benefit the communities of Fresno or San Diego or San Francisco. He is looking for an algorithm that is telling him that if people invest money in this proposition, there's going to be a return on their investments. But that algorithm doesn't talk about those babies that are going to be born with elevated marijuana in their systems, or those kids that are going to be exposed to cookies and candies that look like marijuana. And let's be frank, they took us to court because they didn't like the fact that we discovered that this law says that after decades of not having advertising on television of tobacco, this specific law will allow marijuana advertising on television. They have to make a profit, and to get that $1 billion, they have to sell a lot of marijuana to make sure that that they make their profit. And we already know that people are already buying it in California. So who's their next consumer?
But doesn't some of that money isn't only just sale of marijuana, but it's also spending less money on the criminal justice system that is being spent right now?
And that's the chief of police. All the Association of Police Chiefs are against it. Here in Los Angeles, Sheriff Jim McDonnell is against it because he knows that there are no systems in place to detect if you're driving under their influence. It's going to take sheriff deputies away from investigating other criminal activities because they have to follow the protocols to ensure that the civil liberties of those being stopped and investigated are not broken.
Let's talk about the issue of children, though, because he brings up the issue of TV ads, which is something that's mentioned. But your side would say that they're illegal anyways. I mean,
Well, again, I mean, this is just part and parcel of the campaign. The No on 64 side. They lie about the impact. They lie about advertising. They fearmonger on all these types of things. The fact of the matter is, federal law today does not allow for any kind of advertising whatsoever. TV, radio, print, billboards, no advertising at all. Now, that is the federal law. And if you spend any time in Washington, you know that right now the Congress doesn't necessarily see eye to eye. In order for any kind of advertising to happen at any level, the federal government would have to change its advertising laws, which I think it's safe to say they will not. Even if the federal government were to change its advertising laws, Prop 64 addresses it so that Californians can take control of it themselves about banning advertising if that's what Californians want. And I feel pretty confident about the fact that legislators here in Sacramento, if, and that is a huge if, the Congress were to change its mind on banning advertising of any kind, that I think the legislature would follow suit and not ban it either. That is just simply a fallacy. That is something that these guys continue to talk about. They know it's wrong. They know it's illegal. It's in print. Anybody could look it up. Yet they still continue to perpetuate that fallacy.
Something else that's illegal in federal law is marijuana for recreational use. How do you deal with that? How do you answer that point, and especially some of the finance issues with that in terms of like stacking cash under your, because banks are afraid of using it and things like that as well.
Well, it's not that banks are afraid of using it, it's that current federal law does not allow for the banks, for there to be a banking relationship. So it's not that, that's the current federal law. The answer is this, look, California will be a game changer. When California voters pass Proposition 64, it is going to force the federal government to take a very serious look at the banking rules and regulations. Washington State, Colorado, the District of Columbia, other states currently have moved to legalize marijuana. All quite well, I would say, in those states. The issue, which is out there to be true, is the federal banking issues. But I think, as I said, once California legalizes the adult use of marijuana, I think the federal government is really going to have to rethink its position.
Let me press you on a couple points too. The alcohol right now is legal. Proponents would say that marijuana is not as bad as alcohol. So why should alcohol be legal and marijuana not?
And that's a big argument that is very incomplete. And incomplete because marijuana and alcohol do two separate things to the body. Marijuana afflicts the brain, it stunts its growth for those young people. Alcohol will destroy your liver. But let's be frank, alcohol is not on the ballot. And if we already have legalization of a certain product that is, by all means, could be harmful to many people, alcoholism, the children, why expand another one? And that's the main moral question that we ask. The reality is, when you're going to bring more of one product into the community, there's going to be damage. There will be collateral damage. And I'm yet to hear how the other side addresses it. Their only good side to this law is that there is $1 billion worth for Sacramento, that we're going to be taxing those people that use it, and money going to go to Sacramento, and we're going to put it to good use because we're going to put pressure on the federal government. This is a crusade. But they don't care about the people in the community. In 1982, I was a kid in Los Angeles High School, and I was appointed in this room to represent the 10th Council District, one of the poorest districts in Los Angeles, and then Mayor Bradley's Youth City Council. And the first time I got to leave South Central LA was to go to a very nice city in San Fernando Valley. And the first thing that I recognized is that there weren't liquor stores in every corner like I saw in my district. And I wondered why I had to walk over chalk to go to school, and the kids up in San Fernando Valley didn't. And the reality is there's a social issue to this. They understand who their consumer base is, who they're going to target, and it's the African American and Latino communities that are going to be the guys that are going to be making money for these profiteers.
What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been so tempted to interrupt you, and I won't. But these are the same arguments that the folks in the 30s used to block alcohol. It didn't work then. It isn't going to work now. When it comes to walking over a chalk line, the fact of the matter is today, there were drug dealers and drug cartels who were working overtime in communities of color, in my community, in the Latino community, in African American communities, who are selling junk. Nobody knows what they're getting. They're laced with chemicals, all kinds of crap. What we aim to do is to end the failed war on drugs. It has been an abject failure. And yes on 64 is going to allow for communities to be able to take back their neighborhoods. By the way, the $1 billion isn't going to Sacramento. This is paying for the initiative. It is paying for technology. It is paying for mental health, for drug and alcohol treatment. It is paying for law enforcement to be able to get the technology and the tools they need to be able to deal with drivers, to deal with folks. It's re-educating them on community policing. There are a host of other things that go into this that is being raised by the tax that is being paid on the purchase of marijuana. So this isn't one of those things where this is a boon for Sacramento. To the contrary, the money goes back into the community. 60% in neighborhoods and community for drug and alcohol and mental health treatment. 20% of it, $200 million at least annually, that's going to law enforcement to help them have the tools they need, to deal with the issues they should be dealing with in the community. Not arresting young African American and Latinos, but actually dealing and going after the cartels and going after the drug dealers. Those are the things that they ought to be dealing with, not putting a 19-year-old or a 22-year-old in prison. The statistics are alarming. You've got 8,800 felonies, 6,600, misdemeanors, 4,000, marijuana-only related offenses, half of whom are Latino. The numbers go up and up. And it is time that we end this failed war on drugs. It is time that we say yes on 64.
I mean, do you think that having people in prisons or drug cases for marijuana is a good use of our resources?
Absolutely not. And we don't aim to address that criminalization. That's a whole complete argument. And that's an argument that you should take. That's an argument that you should take. But this specific argument is about bringing incredible amounts of a toxin to communities that we know, because we've seen in Colorado the actual effects. And when you say that all this money is going to go to all these cool things out of Sacramento, I think Californians remember what the lottery was going to do for our school systems and where all that money went and how our school systems are right now. Sacramento is a place where money goes to disappear. And let's be frank.
Yeah, let's be frank.
Yeah,
because, the California Medical Association, doctors, nurses, all support Proposition 64. Why? Because they also understand that there's on the medical marijuana side, they know that there is a medical benefit to it. If this was something, as you say, a toxin, which it isn't, if it was, these folks wouldn't come out and support it. But you've got two statewide organizations who are extraordinarily well regarded in the community and throughout California.
The pediatricians?
That support this.
The pediatricians support you?
I said the CMA and the nurses.
And the California Hospital Association? So what I'm saying is that we have hundreds and hundreds of people in our side that are organizations that have sworn to protect the interests of the citizens, like the police chiefs associations. We're talking about doctors that who understand the effects of this drug in children. And I remind everybody, urge you to see that program of 60 Minutes on Sunday, because you're going to see the reality of what the damage is already causing in a state that is much smaller than California, that has a less minority community. And if you multiply what's happened in Colorado and in California, $1 billion is not going to be enough to mitigate the damages that it's going to cause in our state.
On the issue of children, one of the folks out in the audience wanted me to ask you about the fact that this will increase penalties for people that are over 21 giving marijuana to children. Is that potentially a problem? And are you going to have a situation sort of like we have with alcohol now, where even though 21 is the legal age, people are drinking and smoking at 18, 19 in college, things like that?
Well, let's be honest about this. Today there are teenagers who have access to alcohol. They have access to drugs today. By putting down a marker and saying that this is an adult use of marijuana at 21 years of age or older, there need to be consequences. And we have no issue with that. Look, in order to purchase marijuana, you have to have an ID. Today on the street, if you go to any of the corners in one neighborhood or another, drug dealers don't card kids. But in order to go to a licensed, permitted facility, you have to show ID in order to purchase marijuana.
I want to ask you the question of, a lot of people feel like marijuana is out there, just like alcohol was out there in the 20s and the 30s. So why not regulate it? Why not tax it? Why not have it be safe for people that are going to use it? And why not have some, revenue from it? What do you say?
I agree with all those points. This law specifically does not provide that. They got it wrong again. This is not the first time they tried. And if they come up with a law that actually addresses those issues, then I believe that the Californians need to take a second look at it. But right now, as this specific law that is in front of voters on November 8th comes out to them, this law is not well written, it's not well produced, it's made by profiteers to ensure that the profits go straight to their pockets and that the people in the communities are going to suffer for it, are not part of their equation, and we've got to make sure we stop it.
Okay, so I got about a minute left. I want to give you each 30 seconds to make your final point. I think we started with you, so we'll go here and then go here. All right.
The reality is this is not a moral question we're having. We're trying to decide if this is a good law for California. And what we're trying to present is that we have, fortunately, a picture of what this law can do to California if it passes in Colorado. And that's why we urge you to actually understand, and I know it's very difficult to go through 60 pages written by profiteers to ensure that you think that this law is going to prevent crime from happening. But the district attorney in Denver, Colorado says that 900% increase, 48% is still hurting the people, and the doctors, the pediatricians say the same thing.
Okay.
Well, this is
40 seconds because
This
you
is
went a
very
little
simple. This is the most comprehensive initiative that's been put before California voters. Why? Because we've learned from Colorado, we've learned from Washington, we've worked with the California Highway Patrol, we've worked with community leaders to be able to draft an initiative that is fair, that is comprehensive, and that makes sense for Californians.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much, Michael and Luis. Thank you very much for listening as well, and thank you for being respectful. We appreciate it, and look forward to seeing what's going to happen on this vote. Thank you very much.